They say history is written by the victors, but what if the truth was buried with the fallen? Every secret leaves a trace, if you know where to look. This is The Broken Truth, decoding history, one broadcast at a time. The Broken Truth podcast, where history meets conspiracy. Every case tells a story, every story hides a lie. The sky caught fire, then the world drowned. Most people believe the Great Flood was just a story, a cautionary tale, a myth meant to teach morality. But what if it isn't? What if the flood wasn't symbolic, or allegorical, or a metaphor for spiritual cleansing? What if it was historical? What if the world humanity built before us was erased in a single moment? What if civilization didn't rise once, but twice? 12,900 years ago, the sky exploded. Not once, but in dozens of fireballs across the northern hemisphere. Shockwaves flattened forest. Heat vaporized ice sheets. Firestorms ignited continent-wide. And then, when the oceans were released, the world drowned. Ancient people witnessed it. They survived it. They carried the memory through myth, religion, and story. And modern science, reluctantly, quietly, almost accidentally, is starting to confirm it. Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the greatest catastrophe in human history. Not the one recorded in textbooks, but the one your ancestors lived through. This is the Great Flood and the Younger Dryas Reset. Welcome back to the Broken Truth podcast, the show where we dig into the suppressed chapters, the anomalous evidence, the forgotten civilizations, and the geological fingerprints of a history far older and far stranger than we were taught. I'm your host, Garrett, and today we're stepping into one of the most explosive topics in archaeology, mythology, climate science, and human origins. A story shared by the Bible, the Sumerians, the Maya, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, the Hopi, the Aboriginal Australians, nearly every culture on Earth, separated by oceans and millennia, all describing a time when the world was destroyed by water, preceded by fire, triggered by something falling from the sky. Tonight, we investigate that world-ending event, not as myth, but as memory. If you're listening on Spotify, tap follow. Follow right now to get every episode the moment it drops and help push this show further up the charts so more people can hear the truth. Now let's begin. The official story. Let's start with what mainstream history tells us. According to the narrative, around 20,000 years ago, Earth was in the grip of the last ice age, a frozen world where humanity lived in small nomadic tribes, hunting mammoths and scraping out an existence of the edges of survival. As the climate slowly warmed over thousands of years, the ice sheets melted gradually. The sea levels rose inch by inch. Humans began settling. Agriculture emerged around 10,000 BC. Civilization blossomed around 4,000 to 3,500 BC. This story paints the rise of humanity as a smooth, slow curve. Primitive, farming, cities, civilization, and then us. No catastrophic resets, no broken timelines, no destroyed ancient cultures. Just linear, predictable progress. The official story claims there was no global flood. Ancient myths are symbolic. Changes in climate were gradual. No advanced civilizations existed before Sumer. Humanity had no great trauma, just evolution. It's clean, it's neat, it's simple. It's clean, it's neat, it's simple. And like most simple stories, it falls apart the moment you start asking questions, because the geological record doesn't show slow, gentle warming. It shows violence, sudden shifting, fire, ice, water, and death. A world transforming in real time, not over millennia, but over months. A climate event modern science still cannot explain. An extinction-level event humanity somehow survived. This moment has a name, the Younger Dryas, and nothing about it fits the official story. Cracks in the narrative. Here's what the official narrative refuses to grapple with. Around 12,900 years ago, Earth experienced one of the fastest climate shifts in planetary history. Temperatures plummeted 10 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit in a matter of months. Forest ecosystems collapsed. The megafauna mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths died out nearly simultaneously. Human populations crashed. Water levels surged. And evidence of massive fires appear across continents. Then 1,300 years later, temperatures snapped back into warming just as fast, ending the Younger Dryas in another sudden spike. This isn't how natural climate cycles behave. That's just the beginning. Because beneath the soil, at the exact layer marking the start of the Younger Dryas, scientists found something they could not explain. microscopic molten spherules, nanodiamonds, iridium enrichment, magnetic grains, continents spanning charcoal, melt glass requiring 2,000 or more degrees Celsius, a black mat layer rich with soot and carbon, sudden disappearance of entire ecosystems, all appearing suddenly, globally, in the same thin geological layer. Whatever happened 12,900 years ago wasn't local, it wasn't regional, it was worldwide. And ancient people remembered it. Greek myths called it Pantheon, the sun who lost control of the chariot of the sun, setting Earth ablaze. Hindu tradition calls it the end of the previous yuga, destroyed by fire and followed by flood. The Maya described the death of the fourth world, burned, then drowned. The Hopi tell of fire from the sky, followed by rising waters. The Bible speaks of fountains of the deep and windows of the heaven opening. First, fire. Water second. This is not coincidence, this is chronology. These are survivors preserving the truth in the only form that could last, story. Modern science now reluctantly admits the Younger Dryas was violent, sudden, and catastrophic, but it still refuses to admit the next logical step. What triggered it? And that's where the alternate theories begin. Before we dive deeper, if you're listening on Spotify, take 2 seconds, tap follow, and help push this show further up the charts. It makes a massive difference. Some alternate theories. Something triggered the Younger Dryas, something powerful enough to melt the ice instantly, ignite continent-wide fires, destabilize climate systems, release massive floods, extinguish megafauna, collapse human populations. And the explanation that best fits the data, the one supported by astronomers, geologists, impact researchers, and ancient myth, is this. A fragmented comet entered Earth's atmosphere and exploded over the northern ice sheets. Not a single crater like the dinosaur killer. This was different. A shower of impacts, airbursts, massive explosions in the atmosphere, like dozens of Tunguskas happening simultaneously. The heat from these airbursts could reach over 2,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt glass, vaporize ice, and ignite forests. Imagine standing on a glacial plain as the sky rips open, not with one fireball, but with many, each one exploding with the force of nuclear weapons. Ancient people remember this as the sky falling, fire raining from heaven, the gods throwing stones, a serpent of fire lashing the earth. Comet impacts don't look like Hollywood craters. They produce melt glass, iridium, nanodiamonds, magnetic spherules, shock metamorphism, wildfires, exactly what we find in the black mat layer. This event melted vast portions of the ice sheets, releasing a deluge of meltwater into the oceans and causing sea levels to surge. Coastlines vanished, continents changed shape. Millions of square miles of habitable land drowned. Human civilization, whatever form it had before the flood, was erased. Ancient people didn't call it the Younger Dryas, they called it the Great Flood. The Sumerians recorded it as Utnapishtim's survival. The Bible encoded it as Noah. Greek myth described Deucalion. India preserved the tale of Manu. China described Gun Yu fighting the endless waters. The Maya wrote of a deluge ending the fourth sun. Different names, but same event. But alternate theories don't end there, because if a comet caused the reset, we need to ask as much of a bigger question. Where did that comet come from? And why did ancient cultures insist it would return? To understand the Younger Dryas Reset, we have to reconstruct a moment almost 13,000 years old. A moment of unimaginable destruction, recorded not in photographs or documents, in geology, myth, and the faintest signatures left behind by planetary violence. Let's imagine the scene. It's late Pleistocene North America. The Laurentide ice sheet covers millions of square miles, a frozen wall over 2 miles thick, stretching from modern-day Montana to Hudson Bay. Beneath that ice is pressure, instability, and ancient meltwater reservoirs. Humans live along the coasts and rivers. They hunt mammoths and bison. They've begun carving stone. They've begun aligning monuments to the stars. They are not primitive. They're simply a civilization that built differently. Above them, in the quiet of the night sky, something is approaching. A comet. Or more precisely, the fragments of a once massive comet is entering the inner solar system. Astronomers today call this debris stream the Taurid complex, a sprawling cloud of cosmic shrapnel extending across Earth's orbit. Most years, we pass through it safely, and we call the result a meteor shower. But every few thousand years, the dense core of that stream intersects Earth's path. And when that happens, the sky doesn't sparkle, it explodes. This is what researchers believe happened around 12,900 years ago. Earth collided with the dense heart of torrid debris field, triggering a cascade of atmospheric detonations. Not one, not two, but dozens. Each one with the force of a nuclear bomb. Fragments slammed into the ice sheets at shallow angles, causing them to vaporize instantly. Others exploded mid-air, sending shockwaves rippling across the continent. Forests ignited. Animals died where they stood. Ash and soot filled the atmosphere. Eyewitnesses and ancients were terrified, unable to describe what they were seeing. Later told their children that the sky fell in fire, that a serpent of light burned the world, that the gods were at war above the heavens. But it wasn't war, it was a cosmic impact. And as the ice vaporized, the real destruction began. The water release. When you melt an ice sheet with the volume of a continent, something catastrophic happens. Water is suddenly free. Glacial lakes, held in place by frozen dams, burst simultaneously. Subglacial pressure systems ruptured. Rivers multiplied overnight. Entire drainage basins reversed direction. The most famous example is Lake Agassiz, a freshwater giant larger than all five Great Lakes combined. When its ice dam collapsed, floods hundreds of feet tall ripped across North America. But this wasn't a one-time event. It happened everywhere. Ice sheets in Europe failed. Ice sheets in Canada failed. Ice sheets in Siberia failed. Geologists call the resulting sea level jump Meltwater Pulse 1A. It raised global ocean levels by up to 60 feet in less than 2 years. Think about that. Not inches, not gradual millennia, but feet, year over year. Entire coastal civilizations, whatever form they took, were erased. Imagine standing on a shoreline, watching your land disappear in real time. Your crops, your homes, your gathering places, your monuments. You're dead, all swallowed. Ancient people remembered this as the Great Flood. Every culture preserved it, because how could they not? It was the defining trauma of the human species. But the water wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of this reset. The black mat and the burn scar of a world. If you dig deep enough into ancient soil, at the precise level corresponding to 12,900 years ago, you find something strange. A thin, dark layer of burned organic material. A black mat spread across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Inside this layer are nanodiamonds, microspherules, iridium, soot, charcoal, melted glass, magnetic grains. These materials don't form naturally at the same time. They don't cluster together in neat geological layers, unless something extraordinary happened, unless something exploded, unless heat in excess of 2,000 degrees Celsius was present, unless something rich in iridium, an element more common in asteroids than Earth's crust, vaporized above the ground. Unless a shockwave flattened everything. Ancient fires could not do this. Volcanoes could not do this. Climate change could not do this. But an airburst event, or dozens of them, could. The black mat is the tombstone of the pre-flood world. It is the smoking gun, the signature of a planetary trauma, the physical memory of a cosmic event that wiped out ecosystems and shattered humanity's timeline. But the most important detail is this. The black mat sits directly beneath the flood deposits. Fire, then water. Exactly as myth describes. The death of the megafauna, one of the greatest mysteries in natural history, is the sudden extinction of the Pleistocene giants, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, short-faced bears, direwolves, saber-toothed cats, glyptodons, American lions. These creatures dominated Earth for tens of thousands of years, and then vanished almost instantly. Mainstream science blames climate change, or human overhunting, but neither fits the data. Climate change was too fast. Humans were too few. The extinctions were too synchronized. But a cosmic impact explains it all well. Shockwaves, wildfires, ash-darkened skies, immediate cooling, food chain collapse, floodwaters destroying habitats. This was an extinction-level event, and humans barely survived it. The human population crash. Genetic studies show a dramatic reduction in human diversity around the time of the Younger Dryas. This is known as a population bottleneck, a sudden drop in numbers followed by regrowth from a much smaller group. Ancient stories remember this too. The Bible speaks of 8 survivors. Sumer speaks of a single family preserved by the gods. Hindu scripture described Manu as the last human saved by a divine fish. Indigenous Australian myths speak of only a few tribes surviving the deluge. Of course, these numbers are symbolic, not literal, but the message is clear. Most humans died, a few survived, and those survivors carried the memory of the flood forward for generations, encoding it in stories, rituals, monuments, and religions. The reset was complete. Humanity had to rebuild itself, not over centuries, but over millennia. And that is the hidden truth behind the rise of civilization. Civilization didn't begin in Sumer. Civilization restarted in Sumer. But we'll get there after the next act. Because before we talk about what came after the flood, we need to understand the evidence preserved not by myth, but by accident. Ice cores, sea floors, and declassified geological data that reveal the magnitude of the Younger Dryas impact. But before we continue, if you're listening on Spotify, tap follow. It's the number one thing that pushes this show to new listeners and keeps episodes like this flowing every week. Declassified documents and evidence. Now we move into the physical trail, the clues left behind, not by storytellers or priests or scribes, but by the earth itself. This is where geology becomes testimony, and history becomes evidence, because the Younger Dryas Reset isn't just myth. It isn't just theory. It isn't just fringe research. It is written into the Greenland ice sheets, the North American fire scars, the meltwater pulse deposits, the Carolina Bay features, the submerged continental shelves, and the ancient ruins now lying under the ocean. We're going to examine each of these in detail, and we're going to begin with something discovered only recently, something that mainstream academia still refuses to fully acknowledge: a massive impact structure buried beneath the Greenland ice sheet. A crater potentially formed at the exact moment of the Younger Dryas onset. But that story continues in part 3. Declassified documents and evidence. The Hiawatha Crater, Earth's hidden scar. In 2018, scientists using ice-penetrating radar discovered something remarkable beneath the Greenland ice sheet: a massive circular structure 20 miles wide and depressed into the bedrock under nearly a mile of ice. They named it the Hiawatha Crater. The official papers were extremely cautious. Extremely. They didn't declare it an impact crater outright. They simply described anomalous morphology consistent with a large impact structure. But behind closed doors, this was dynamite. If Hiawatha is an impact crater, and the evidence leans heavily in that direction, then it represents one of the largest impacts in the past 3 million years. And here's the kicker. Ice core studies above the structure suggest it could be younger than 13,000 years old, meaning it might align perfectly with the Younger Dryas onset, meaning it might be ground zero for the Great Flood. Even if Hiawatha wasn't caused by the main airburst sequence, it could easily be one of the larger fragments from the comet event, the same event that kicked Earth into environmental freefall. Greenland's ice, once thought to be timeless and stable, suddenly looked like a crime scene. But the Hiawatha Crater is only one piece of the evidence chain. Next, we move south to the strange elliptical depressions scattered across the American East Coast. Depressions that point like arrows toward the ice sheet. The Carolina Bays, the ground remembers. Stretching from New Jersey to northern Florida are more than 50,000 oval landforms known as Carolina Bays. They're not lakes, they're not ponds. They're not natural wetlands. They are elliptical craters, all angled in the same direction, like a shotgun blast, aimed at the Great Lakes region, precisely where the massive ice sheet once stood. For decades, scientists debated them: wind erosion, water pooling, and coincidental shapes. But the geometry is too precise, the alignment is too consistent, the distribution is too patterned. The bay appears to be secondary impacts, debris ejected from a larger blast striking soft ground at high velocity. Think of them like spatter, the pattern left after a major explosion. Independent labs replicated bay-like structures by firing icy projectiles into saturated sand. The resulting depressions matched the bays almost perfectly. This suggests something hit the ice sheet with unimaginable force. It ejected massive chunks of superheated ice. Those ice chunks rained down across the East Coast. They formed the Carolina Bays, and this lines up exactly with the Younger Dryas firestorm. But there's another type of evidence buried deep under the sea. Evidence of cities, entire coastlines that no longer exist. The drowned continental shelf, the world we lost. When sea levels rose after the Younger Dryas, they didn't rise by a few feet. They rose by hundreds. This means the coastlines of the ancient world, where humans always congregate, are now underwater. When divers and sonar teams began exploring the submerged continental shelf, they found stone-cut structures, rectilinear patterns, drowned river channels, ancient harbors, pyramidal shapes, megalithic alignments. The most famous examples include Yonaguni in Japan, a massive underwater stone terrace, perfect right angles, giant steps carved into bedrock. Debate still rages, but the geometry is undeniable. The Gulf of Cambay in India. Sonar scans revealed a submerged grid of structures older than any known city. Artifacts recovered there date to 9,000 or more years old. Cuban underwater megaliths. A team mapping ocean floors found symmetrical stone formations at depths over 2,000 feet, far older than any known culture. The Sunda Shelf, Southeast Asia. Once a vast connected landmass supporting large human populations, now half of it is underwater. Doggerland in the North Sea. A massive prehistoric region, once home to thousands, swallowed by rising waters. These are not random artifacts. They are the graves of a drowned world. And they all point to a crisis that reshaped humanity. But the most damning evidence isn't underwater. It's in the ice. Ice core evidence and Earth's memory storage. Greenland and Antarctica preserve climate history like a hard drive, and the Younger Dryas leaves a signature so dramatic it still baffles researchers. In ice cores, dated to 12,900 years ago, we find a sudden spike in platinum. Platinum is rare in Earth's crust, but common in meteorites, soot and wildfire residues, global-scale burning. A sharp cooling of up to 18 degrees Fahrenheit in less than a year. Something blocks sunlight, likely atmospheric dust from airbursts. Microscopic spherules formed from molten rock, cooling rapidly after impact. Nanodiamonds, only created through intense pressure, like a cosmic explosion. This is not normal. This is not slow climate oscillation. This is catastrophe. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. After the sudden cooling comes a sudden warming. Around 11,600 years ago, Earth snapped back into near-modern conditions in a geological instant. Ancient myths record this moment too. The Sumerians call it the return of the sun. The Egyptians speak of the first time. Greek myth describes a new dawn over a washed world. Hindu texts describe the end of a Priyala, the dissolution, and the rebirth of the world. Science and myth tell the same story in different languages, but evidence of the impact doesn't end with geology. It lives in archaeology, in the sites that shouldn't exist. Göbekli Tepe, the Temple of Survivors. At the top of a Turkish hill lies one of the greatest archaeological anomalies ever uncovered, Göbekli Tepe. Dated to around 11,600 years ago, the exact moment the Younger Dryas ended, and it appears fully formed. This isn't a simple settlement. It's a monumental complex. Stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in perfect circles, carved with animals, astronomical patterns, and symbols. Not only does Göbekli Tepe predate agricultural writing, pottery, and cities, it rewrites the story of civilization. Because you don't build something this massive unless you have engineers, you have planners, you have labor coordination, you have astronomical knowledge, you have reason. Göbekli Tepe looks like a memorial, a gathering point, a reconstruction center, a place where survivors came together after the catastrophe. Some researchers believe the carving on Pillar 43, the vulture stone, record a comet strike through astronomical symbols. The alignment matches the Taurid meteor stream. In other words, Göbekli Tepe might be a warning, a message carved in stone, from people who watched the sky destroy the world. But Göbekli Tepe wasn't alone. Another site, far more controversial, tells the same story. The Younger Dryas barrage of airbursts. In the early 2000s, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis faced ridicule. Today, it has hundreds of peer-reviewed papers, dozens of confirmed sites, global material evidence, astronomical support, geochemical signatures. But one piece stands out. Air distribution mapping. Scientific mapping shows a pattern of 5 scars, melt glass deposits, and magnetic anomalies stretching across North America, Greenland, Northern Europe, North Africa, the Middle East. This wasn't one explosion. It was dozens. A cosmic shotgun blast. An event so loud it echoes in our DNA, and in the stories we still tell. The government's quiet interest. This is where it gets interesting. For decades, NASA, the US Air Force, and DARPA have invested heavily in near-Earth object tracking, modeling impact winter, and studying historical extinction level events. Why? Because they know the truth. Earth has been hit before. It will be hit again. Declassified documents from Cold War programs reveal atmospheric nuclear detonation simulations cross-referenced with airburst models. Government concern over ocean impact tsunamis. Classified studies on continental scale flooding scenarios. Research into rapid climate shock events. Publicly, agencies insist these are hypothetical, but privately, they match the Younger Dryas data perfectly. But we're not done, because now we move into the emotional core of the story. What happened after the flood? What happened when humanity had to start over? And why ancient people preserved their trauma as myth, not to entertain, but to warn. That begins in part 4. Why it matters today, the human story, survivors of a broken world. Imagine waking up in a world that no longer exists. Your coastline is gone. Your food sources are gone. Your rivers have reversed direction. Your climate has shifted overnight. Your sky is filled with ash. Your stars look different. Your people, your entire culture, has been reduced to a fraction of what it once was. This was not gradual adaptation. This was not slow evolution. This was survival in the ashes of a global reset. That's part of the Younger Dryas story we rarely talk about. The people who made it through. Because if even a small percentage of humanity survived the fire and flood, the trauma they carried would define everything that came after. Let's explore how this single event shaped our myths, our religions, our architecture, our obsession with the sky, our sense of time, our fear of cycles, our entire worldview. The Great Flood wasn't the end of an age. It was the beginning of ours. The survivors remembered. Ancient flood myths aren't cheerful stories. They aren't bedtime tales. They are trauma memories preserved. Every culture's flood stories contain the same elements. A golden age before the destruction. A sudden calamity from the sky. A flood that destroys the world. A chosen or lucky survivor. Animals preserved in some kind of vessel. A mountain of refuge. A rebirth of civilization. These aren't symbols, they're sequences. They are eyewitness testimonies passed through oral tradition for thousands of years. The Book of Genesis records it, Epic of Gilgamesh records it, the Maya Popol Vuh records it, the Aboriginal Dreamtime records it, the Zoroastrian Bunda Hishin records it, the Hopi and Zuni record it. Different languages, same story, same trauma. The flood didn't just wash away land, it washed away memory. But the survivors tried to salvage what they could, and the result was civilization. The rebirth of humanity. After the Younger Dryas ended around 11,600 years ago, something extraordinary happened. Human civilization exploded across the world. This is the exact window when Göbekli Tepe was constructed. Agriculture emerged, the first cities appeared, monumental architecture began, astronomy advanced, symbolic writing developed, seafaring cultures re-emerged. Historians often call this the Neolithic Revolution, but that implies mankind suddenly became innovative. That's not what the evidence shows. Göbekli Tepe appears fully formed, as if built by people who already had knowledge. Jericho, one of the earliest cities, appears suddenly, with walls and tower planning. Catalhoyuk emerges with unique religious iconography. Sumer appears with writing, irrigation systems, and advanced cosmology. These aren't the inventions of primitive people. They are the reconstructions of a culture that remembered something older, something lost. It's as if humanity rebooted with fragments of its former software. Civilization didn't spontaneously appear, it reappeared, and the myth of gods descending from the mountains, oceans, or sky. Those weren't gods. They were survivors of a world that died. The teachers, gods, sages, and culture bringers. Every civilization has legends of beings who appear after the flood to teach humanity how to rebuild, and they are all described almost identically. Tall, bearded, radiant, and wise. Humans, but not like other humans, capable of agriculture, astronomy, architecture, and law. The Sumerians called them Apkallu, 7 sages who survived the deluge. Egypt called them Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. Greek myth calls them the Titans, and later, Prometheus, bringer of fire and knowledge. The Maya describe Itzamna, who taught writing and calendars. The Inca speak of Viracocha, found walking out of Lake Titicaca after a great flood. Polynesia has Cain and Kanaloa, who rebuilt the world. Who were these people? Not extraterrestrials, not divine beings, not supernatural, but survivors. knowledge holders who preserve fragments of the pre-flood world and reseeded humanity with lost understanding. Sorry to interrupt your regularly scheduled podcast, but this episode is brought to you by the Broken Truth merch. Support the show. Wear the truth. Official Broken Truth podcast merch is live now. Links in the description. And since you've made it this far in the episode, comment hashtag Broken Truth and leave us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. Because when you speak up, the algorithm listens. And so does the world. To dramatically reduce societies, these people appeared godlike, but they were simply carrying knowledge from a civilization that died. This is where religion begins, not as mythology, but as memory. The obsession with the sky. Why did the earliest civilizations build? Star-aligned temples, solstice markers, lunar and solar observatories, ziggurats, pyramids, henges, megalithic calendars. Because their ancestors saw the sky destroy the world. They tracked stars obsessively because the position of the stars predicted danger. This is why so many ancient sites align to the Taurid meteor stream, the same stream believed to have caused the Younger Dryas impact. Göbekli Tepe, Nabta Playa, Stonehenge, Göbekli Circle, Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun. These weren't ceremonial sites. They were warning systems. Ancient people didn't track the heavens for fun. They tracked the heavens out of fear. The Ark is a symbol of preservation. Whether it's Noah, Utnapishtim, Deucalion, Manu, Nuwa, or others, the story carries one core idea. Preserve knowledge and life because destruction is cyclical. The Ark isn't just a boat. It is a vessel of genetic diversity, a preservation of memory, a library of the living, a symbolic restart mechanism. It's a message from the survivors. Build redundancies, prepare for catastrophe, preserve knowledge, and the cycle returns. The fear of water. Every ancient culture uses water as a symbol of renewal, but also terror. Why? Because their world drowned. Water both saved and destroyed them. It washed away the old world while creating the conditions for the new. This duality shapes baptism rituals, creation myths, cleansing rites, agricultural symbolism, concepts of rebirth. The Great Flood wasn't just an event. It became a metaphor for the fragility of existence, a reminder that civilization could vanish in a matter of days. And this is why the ancients did everything possible to preserve memory through story, stone, ritual, astronomy, and architecture. They didn't want their descendants to forget, but we did. Modern society lost that ancestral fear. We dismissed their warnings as allegory. And now, we stand in the same cosmic trajectory, with no memory of what happened last time. Are we next? The cycle theory. Ancient cultures insist the destruction came in cycles. The Maya believed in repeating suns, each destroyed by fire and flood. Greek philosophers like Plato described recurring cataclysms. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, each ending with natural disaster. Egyptian priests told Solon that civilization had been destroyed many times. The Hopis speak of past worlds ending by fire, ice, and water. Why would cultures on opposite ends of the world speak of time as a cycle of world-ending resets? Because they inherited the memory of one. And astronomers today are beginning to recognize that Earth's orbit passes through dense debris fields, especially the Taurid complex, on predictable cycles. Some researchers believe these cycles align with mass extinctions, megafire events, rapid climate shifts, meteor bombardments. In other words, the sky that destroyed the world once may not be done with us. This is why the Younger Dryas matters today. It wasn't just the past, it might be the future. But before we discuss why this affects us now, we need to explore a deeper truth. Civilization didn't just begin after the flood. It was engineered, rebuilt, reconstructed from memory by people who refused to let humanity die. In part 5, we explore how the survivors shaped the world we inherited. The rebuilding, how the flood reshaped civilization. After the flood, everything changed. When the Younger Dryas ended around 11,600 years ago, Earth warmed rapidly, ice sheets retreated, rivers stabilized, plants and animals recolonized new ground. For humans, this moment wasn't just climate recovery, it was civilizational rebirth. Because the people who survived the Great Flood, the ones who lived through fire, darkness, famine, and rising seas, carried knowledge, memory, and trauma into the new world. And those memories became the blueprint for civilization. The rise of agriculture, a necessity, not an invention. Textbooks claim agriculture was invented around this time, as if humanity suddenly discovered farming. But think about it. Humanity existed for hundreds of thousands of years before agriculture. If farming was simply discovered, why didn't it appear earlier? Why did it emerge suddenly? In the Fertile Crescent, in Anatolia, in the Indus Valley, in China, in Mesoamerica, all within a few thousand years. Because agriculture wasn't an idea, it was a reintroduction, a memory of pre-flood survival, adapted to post-flood reality. Hunter-gatherers could no longer rely on stable ecosystems. The megafauna were gone, forests had burned, the climate was volatile. Wild sources of food were unpredictable. Survivors had to rebuild food production systems, and so agriculture didn't appear gradually, it exploded. This wasn't innovation, it was reconstruction. Megalithic engineering, out of nowhere, within a blink of geological time. Megalithic architecture appears across the world. We have Göbekli Tepe, Jericho, Nivali Kori, Göbekli's sister sites, stone circles across the Levant, early proto-ziggurats, megalithic stone alignments in Europe. These structures don't represent early experimentation. They represent competence, sophistication, organization, engineering know-how, knowledge that shouldn't exist in primitive post-Ice Age societies, unless those societies inherited fragments of older expertise. Imagine, if a population lost 90% of its knowledge, but preserved 10%, building with stone would be the first sacred skill preserved. Stone lasts, stone records, stone remembers. So survivors built with stone because it was their way of anchoring memory, making sure their story survived the next catastrophe. This is why the earliest monuments aren't small huts, they're temples, circles, enclosures, observatories, places meant to reconstitute meaning after global trauma. Astronomy, a necessary fixation. Nearly every early civilization had solar calendars, lunar calendars, stellar tracking systems, mythology tied to constellations, accurate solstice and equinox markers. Alignments pointed toward the torrid meteor stream. This wasn't mysticism. This wasn't fear. Their ancestors had watched the sky destroy the world, so they watched the sky with religious devotion. Why did the Egyptians track Sopdet, Sirius, with such accuracy? Why did the Maya monitor the Pleiades? Why did Göbekli Tepe encode astronomical symbols? Why do countless megaliths align to the movement of Taurus and Orion? Because they all inherited the same warning. When the stars align, be cautious, the cycle returns. Astronomy wasn't a hobby, it was a survival skill. The rebuilding of time, calendars as trauma artifacts. Before the flood, time was seasonal and cyclical. After the flood, time became restructured. Humanity suddenly created 12-month calendars, 360-day ceremonial cycles, 365-day astronomical cycles, ages and epochs, flood anniversaries, cosmic cycles. This transformation wasn't coincidence. It was the result of people trying to track when the next disaster might arrive, where the comet fragments move, how the stars shift after axis changes, how to rebuild societies predictably. Timekeeping became a form of protection, the redistribution of peoples, repatterning the world. After the flood, population centers emerged in places that were far from coastlines, were geologically stable, had access to fresh water, had fertile post-flood soil, were less likely to experience future sea level rise. This is why early civilizations formed in Mesopotamia, Egypt's Nile Valley, Anatolia, the Indus River Basin, the Yellow River Valley, Mesoamerica's highlands. These were safe zones, high ground, stable climates, predictable rivers fed by glacial melt. Humanity didn't settle here by chance. Survivors reset civilization based on new environmental constraints. The gap in our history, what got lost, between the oldest archaeological sites and the first recorded civilizations, there's a mysterious gap, a dark age of nearly 6,000 years where humanity was rebuilding but not writing. This is not because nothing happened. It's because people focused on survival. Global trauma erased cultural memory. Sea level rise submerged pre-flood knowledge. Ancient archives were destroyed. Hunter-gatherer lifestyles were temporarily necessary. Human populations were too small and scattered to sustain writing systems. This is the missing chapter of humanity, a chapter defined not by stagnation, but by reconstruction. The emergence of myth, history encoded as story. To modern ears, myths are entertainment. To survivors, myths were historical accounts, warning systems, memory preservation, moral frameworks built from trauma, explanations for catastrophe, tools to maintain cosmological order. The Great Flood myth was the anchor memory of humanity, the event that around which all other meaning was built. It explained why the world changed, why the climate shifted, why animals went extinct, why architecture had to begin again. It was the origin story of a new world, and it carried an even more important message. This happened once, it can happen again. The cultures who remembered the most. Some civilizations preserved more accurate versions of the flood story than others. Sumerians, their flood story includes measurements of the ark, the names of survivors, the sequence of fire, darkness, and water, the timeline of recovery. Egyptians, priests told Solon that civilizations are wiped out regularly. Fire and water shape human destiny. The gods reset humanity. Their knowledge came from survivors of earlier worlds. The Greeks, Plato recorded the tale of cataclysmic floods, cyclical destruction, a lost world swallowed by the sea, the exact date that aligns with the Younger Dryas. Indigenous Americans, many tribes preserve sky serpents bringing fire, stars falling, sudden freezing, animals dying, being led to high ground by spirit guides. Aboriginal Australians, their oldest accounts describe shorelines drowning, islands disappearing, dramatic sea level rise, migration inland. These are not myths, they are survivor literature. The psychology of a resetted species. Humans today carry psychological echoes of this ancient trauma. Why do we fear deep water? The darkening of the sky, firestorms, comets and asteroids, environmental collapse. Why do apocalyptic stories resonate across cultures, religions, and entertainment? Because our ancestors lived through an apocalypse, and memory encoded itself in our collective psyche. We are the children of survivors. The flood shaped our instincts, our fears, our myths, and our architecture, our religions, our sense of time, our relationship with the sky. It defined us. But the most important reason the Great Flood story matters today is because the mechanism that caused it is still alive, still in orbit, still approaching, still cycling. And we may be entering another window of danger. In part 6, we dive into the cosmic cycle, the Taurid complex, and the disturbing evidence that Earth may be moving toward the next reset. This is the darkest, most revealing section of the episode, where ancient warnings collide with modern astronomy. The return of the cycle, the sky that destroyed the world, but never left. If the Younger Dryas impact was caused by a fragmented comet, then logic demands we ask a single terrifying question. Where is that comet now? Did it vaporize? Did it leave Earth's orbit forever? Was it a one-time cosmic accident? Or is it still out there, waiting? Astronomers began investigating this decades ago, and what they found is one of the most ominous patterns in planetary science. The comet didn't disappear. It became something far worse. A massive debris field, the Taurid complex. This isn't a metaphor. It's not fringe research. NASA, the European Space Agency, and dozens of observatories study it closely. The Taurid complex is enormous, dense, ancient, and crossing Earth's orbit right now. It contains dust, meteoroids, small asteroids, large impact-capable fragments. And the densest, most dangerous part of the debris system, called the Taurid swarm, intersects Earth's orbit roughly every 3,000 to 4,000 years. The last catastrophic pass, roughly 12,900 years ago. The Younger Dryas, the Great Flood, the Last Reset. The next significant overlap window. Right now, through the year 2032 with continued windows beyond. This isn't fear-mongering, it's astronomy. The dangerous fragments inside the Taurid complex. Inside this cosmic debris river, astronomers have identified several large objects. 2015 TX24, 2005 UR, 2004 TG10, 2015 QB1. Dozens of others estimated at 100 to 300 meters. Any one of these could destroy a region, collapse global crop production, trigger volcanic or atmospheric cascades, vaporize coastlines, cause tsunamis, break apart and create additional fragments. But the truly terrifying part is the number of unidentified objects. The Taurids contain dust and rocks, too dark to detect until they're dangerously close. A cosmic trap hiding in the dark. Ancient civilizations were terrified of this region of the sky. They tracked it religiously. They built temples aligned to it. They feared one constellation above all others, Taurus, the celestial bull, not because it symbolized strength, but because it symbolized destruction. In many ancient myths, the bull's unleashed rage destroys the world. What were they really describing? A meteor stream that crossed Earth's path with terrifying predictability. Why ancient people tracked the Taurids? Consider this. Göbekli Tepe's vulture stone points to the Taurid radiant. The Pleiades cluster, a major Taurid node, appears in flood myths globally. Ancient Egyptians associated this region of the sky with death cycles. The Maya connected it to world ages ending in fire. Stonehenge aligns with solar positions that bracketed the Taurid meteor window. The Greeks encoded the threat in Zeus's battle with Typhoon linked to Taurus. These cultures weren't worshipping stars. They were watching the danger zone. They were studying the region that had destroyed their world once before. Every myth becomes clear when retranslated through scientific reality. The heavens opened, then we had atmospheric fragmentation. The stars fell like rain into a meteor swarm. The sky serpent struck Earth with comet trajectory. The bull of heaven raged, the Taurid impact. The gods punished mankind, ecological collapse. The world drowned, meltwater surge. Myth is not primitive imagination. Myth is encoded trauma wrapped in storytelling to survive generations. And modern astronomers confirm the ancients were right to fear this region. The NASA problem. We can't see what's coming. NASA admits they have cataloged only 40% of potential city killer asteroids, less than 10% of Tunguska-scale objects, almost none of the smaller fragments capable of regional destruction. Objects in the Taurid stream are especially hard to detect because they approach from the direction of the sun. They're dark and non-reflective. They travel in clusters. They blend into cosmic background. In 2019, a meteor roughly the size of a house detonated over the Bering Sea, with the energy of multiple nuclear bombs. NASA didn't detect it until after it exploded. In 2022, another similar object detonated over Iceland, also undetected. Both occurred during Taurid-adjacent windows. The truth, we are nowhere near prepared, and the cycle is active again. Evidence of recent fragments hitting Earth. Scientists have recorded unusual fireballs, atmospheric blasts, and meteor detonations clustered around 1908, 1930, 1947, 1972, 2009, 2013, 2018, 2022. Many share similar incoming angles, seasonal timing, meteoroid composition, trajectory patterns, all traceable to Taurid origin objects. The Younger Dryas wasn't a one-time freak event. It was a cyclical pattern of Earth moving through a cosmic minefield, and we're entering that field again. The return window, what a new impact would mean. This is where the story becomes chilling. Imagine even a moderate fragment, say 100 to 150 meters, entering Earth's atmosphere today. If it explodes mid-air, a city vaporizes. Shockwaves flatten surrounding regions. Global trade collapses. Economies implode. Food supply chains fail. Nuclear reactions might cascade. Power grids collapse. If it strikes the ocean, mega tsunamis, coastal cities wiped out, harbors destroyed, sea level chaos, long-term global cooling. If it hits a glacier, instant meltwater floods, abrupt sea level rise, atmospheric particulates cooling the climate, widespread environmental disruption. The Younger Dryas showed us how fragile Earth's systems are. Now imagine it happening in a world with 8 billion people, connected infrastructure, global reliance on technology, nuclear reactors, satellites, supply chains, governments preoccupied with geopolitics. Modern civilization might not just suffer, it might collapse. We aren't resilient like ancient hunter-gatherers. We depend on systems. Systems break, and nature does not care. What the ancients tried to tell us. After the flood, ancient cultures sent a unified message across time, a warning encoded in temples, myths, calendars, and rituals. They said, watch the sky, cycles return. Fire precedes the flood. The destroyer comes from the stars. We rebuilt before. You may need to again. We dismiss their warnings as superstition, but the data now matches the myth. The Taurid complex exists. Its larger fragments exist. Its cycle exists. And we are living inside it. This brings us to the final act. What we must understand today. What we must prepare for. And why the Great Flood is not ancient history, but a preview. So why it matters today. The next reset. what the flood means for our future. The Great Flood isn't just a memory. It's not a bedtime story or a metaphor. It's not religious poetry or ancient exaggeration. It was the last time humanity faced total annihilation. And according to the evidence, it won't be the last time. If the same cosmic mechanism that caused the Younger Dryas impact still exists, and astronomers can confirm that it does, then humanity is living on borrowed time. This doesn't mean fear. This doesn't mean panic. This means awareness. Because the ancients weren't trying to scare us. They were trying to teach us. They were saying, we learned the hard way, and you don't have to. The flood shaped our religions because our ancestors needed hope. The flood shaped our myths because survivors needed to warn their children. The flood shaped our calendars because they needed to track danger. The flood shaped our architecture because they wanted memory carved into stone. The Great Flood was the defining event of the world, and the defining trauma of the new one. We carry its echo in our DNA. Our obsession with apocalypse stories, our nightmares of deep water, our instinctive fear of falling stars, our fascination with the end of days, our religious imagery of cosmic judgment. This is not coincidence, it's inheritance. We are the children of the reset. So here's the part modern science doesn't like to confront. We are not the first civilization. We are simply the latest. The world before the flood wasn't alien or mythical or magical. It was human. A humanity with memory, culture, knowledge, different from ours, but not lesser. A humanity wiped clean. A humanity forced to start over on the high ground. A humanity that tried, desperately, to tell the truth before fading into time. They carved warnings into stone. They aligned their monuments to the sky. They encoded knowledge into myths. They spread the story across every continent. Fire came first, then water, and the world restarted. What they witnessed is the reason we exist today, and what they feared we may face again, because everything they saw, every sign, every omen, every cycle, was not about the past, it was about the future. So the final question, after everything we've explored, after the geology, the astronomy, the mythology, the extinctions, the ruins, the black mat layer, the comet fragments, the drowned world beneath our oceans, you're left with this. Could the Great Flood happen again? And the truth, the broken truth, is this. Yes. The mechanism still orbits overhead. The torrid complex is still there. Earth still swings through its densest clusters. Large fragments are still hidden in the dark. NASA still can't see most of them. And ancient cultures were not warning us about their past. They were warning us about the future. We survived it once, but today, we are far more vulnerable. We rely on technology, we rely on infrastructure, we rely on global systems that can crumble overnight. A reset today would not reshape civilization, it would erase it. So ask yourself, are we paying attention? Are we prepared? Or have we forgotten the single most important lesson our ancestors tried to leave behind? Because the sky never stopped watching us, and one day we may watch it fall again. This has been the Broken Truth Podcast, and today we uncovered the greatest forgotten chapter of human history, the Great Flood and the Younger Dryas Reset, the event that ended the world and began another. If this episode opened your mind, if it made you question what we think we know, if it made you rethink myth, science, religion, and the stories humanity carries, make sure you follow the show on Spotify. It's the single biggest way you can support the podcast, push the investigations higher in the charts, and help bring lost history back into the light. Tap follow right now. New episodes drop Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, with a bonus intelligence brief on Friday and a Bible study deep dive on Saturday. And as always, stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop seeking the broken truth.
In a world built on hidden histories and half-truths, we've only just begun to peel back the layers. Because what you've heard tonight was never meant to be known, but you were meant to find it. If you're ready to go deeper, leave us a review, comment your thoughts, share this episode, and step inside the archives. Join the inner circle, where the real evidence is kept. This is the broken truth, because the truth isn't whole, it's broken.